Happy Easter. Happy Easter. Okay, quick little fact for you. You know that there are 2 billion marshmallow peeps made every year? Yep. And the company says only 75% of them are for today. So I want to know what they do with the other 25%. I don't think I see peeps anytime except this time of the year. I think what they do with the rest of them is they just, well, we know what we do with the rest of them. We put them in the microwave and watch them blow up. Come on, admit it. You know you do it. So which came first, the bunny or the egg, you know? It's like this is a question we have every year. But really, honestly, we have Easter, we have Oster, the fertility goddess, we have eggs, we have bunnies. There's just so many traditions that have been piled on top of other traditions and, you know, heaped onto this present-day celebration. We don't even know why we do what we do a lot of times. But who knows, wherever it originated from, we know that it's not important whether or not it historically happened or whether or not, you know, we're talking about facts or we're talking about mythology. The whole idea of this time of year has its importance because of how it relates to us personally, and it has to be meaningful for us. It's got to be our story. So there is this resurrection story, which is part of this time of the year also. And so you have to have the birth and betrayal and sacred wound in order to have death and then rebirth to happen. And the resurrection story is an ancient story. It goes back many, many years, and Christianity co-opted it naturally, like they did a lot of things, like the eggs and Oster and the bunny and the fertility goddess and all the rest of it. You know, it was to bring the heathens into the fold, and have something that was familiar so that they could then use that as a conversion technique. But the resurrection story is a story that has gone on throughout history. Horus of Egypt, 3,000 years ago, 3,000 BC. Mithra of Persia, 1200 BC. Krishna of India, 900 BC. Dionysus in Greece, 500 BC. Jesus of Nazareth, 33 AD. And Apollonius of Tirana, which was 98 AD. All of these men, all of these saviors, they all shared the same mythology. They all had virgin births. They all spent time in solitude. They were all tempted by the dark side. They began a teaching or a ministry. They gained followers. All of them had 12 disciples. Isn't that convenient? They were all persecuted, killed, the story goes, spent 3 days dead, rose again on the 3rd day, ascended into heaven or nirvana or whatever you want to call it. This Savior story has been around forever. The resurrection story is a mythology that has been around for a long, long time. And we have the opportunity today to look at it again and to go beyond the physical, to go beyond the historical, to go beyond the mythological, and to see what meaning it has for us in our lives. You know, it is the story of dying to an old way of being and being reborn at a higher level, being more of who Spirit intended us to be, to die to the old and to come into greater expression of who and what we are as spirits in form, in human body. And Ernest Holmes said this. He said, "We believe the Christ consciousness. The Christ comes to all and each alike. There is no one particular man who was predestined to become the Christ. We must understand that the Christ is not a person, but it is a principle. It is a principle. It is the divine consciousness within each and every one of us." And so this whole Holy Week is about that. It's about what it means to us and to our lives. It has to have meaning for us. So the whole Holy Week takes place as Jesus entered into the city. And, you know, he entered in Palm Sunday, which is really a traditional fall festival. So symbolically, this whole Holy Week is the entire year encapsulated in 1 week. The entrance into the city on Palm Sunday was symbolic of a fall festival, the palms, waving. And so he enters. And the first thing that he does, he goes to the temple, and he engages in the merchants, and he kicks them out, right? We all know that story. That's really popular, and it's that one of, they said, of righteous indignation. I love that. They call it righteous indignation. No, he was just pissed off. Come on, let's face it. He was just really angry. And the thing is, he tosses them out, but symbolically, what is he doing? On the higher level, on a metaphysical level, what is he doing? But he's telling us, telling the people around, not to mistake the ritual for the presence. That's really what was happening. From a higher perspective, the event is telling us, do not confuse the ritual with the truth. The rules and the procedures became doctrine, and then they get tied to it, and that doctrine becomes superstition and ritual and dogma, and it takes the place of an authentic encounter with the divine. It's like that old story about, pointing the finger to the moon, that old Buddhist story about the finger pointing to the moon. We get all so caught up in the finger, we stop looking at what the finger is pointing to. We confuse the practice with the presence. The ritual is only there to remind us of what is true, what has been true all along, the sacred aspect of our lives. But when we mistake the practice of the rituals for the divine itself, we're putting our faith in an action and not in spirit. So then we wind up with a kind of a superstitious faith tradition where we have to light candles and we have to sing certain songs and we have to face in the right direction and we have to pray, we have to kneel, we have to do this, we have to do that. All of the rituals and the procedures become the important part, and we lose the underlying truth that all of those things were there to help us facilitate an encounter, a communion with the divine. All of those things were there to help us to have that encounter of the divine, to have that awareness, and to uncover the truth about ourselves. And then what happens is the ritual takes the place for that encounter. So that's really what was going on when everybody was tossed out of the temple. Sankara, in the wisdom of the Hindu gurus, said this: illness is not cured by saying the word medicine, but by taking medicine. Enlightenment is not achieved by repeating the word God, but directly experiencing the divine. Directly experiencing the divine. So when Jesus drove the money changers out of the temple, he was reminding us, do not mistake the ritual for the experience. We are here, each one of us, to have our own private and personal communion with Spirit, which is really the truth of our bodies, the truth of our lives. It is the truth of who we are. So then Thursday happens, right? And they have the Passover Seder. And Jesus is engaged in spiritual community. What a wonderful thing. We are engaged in spiritual community. That's what Vision is all about, coming together to know the truth for ourselves and to know the truth for each other, to praise and raise, to know of each other as a higher being, to identify the truth of us, which is within each and every one of us, is this divine life of spirit expressing. We're God in hiding. Let's face it, that's who we are. We're God in hiding. And spiritual community has a way of letting us know that. We come together and we know the best for each other. We bless each other. We praise and raise. So on Thursday, Jesus gets together with his disciples and has a Passover Seder. And he speaks to the bread and the wine as his body and blood. And in fact, he was right. The entire outpicturing of the physical world is but a representation of a spiritual idea. Everything in the manifest universe has a spiritual mental equivalent. Everything begins in thought first and then outpictures in form. And so he was telling the truth. This is my body. It is a physical representation of a spiritual idea. He was praising and he was raising the spiritual idea that everything in the physical world has its beginnings in the spiritual. Everything around us, everything in the manifest universe is an outpicturing of divine thought. And then Jesus retires to the garden and he goes for prayer and meditation. And the garden story is calling us to surrender. It is the type of surrender where we yield to Spirit. It's not like sending up the white flag and giving up, but it's a surrendering to the greater idea of who we are. We let go of life as we know it. We let go of the life we've had. We let go of life as we know it in order to engage in life at a higher level, at our spiritual best. We have to let go of what we have in order to get to a higher place. We can't grab onto anything new if we're holding on to so tightly to what we already have. So the garden experience calls us to surrender. It represents our willingness to let go of the familiar so we can engage with a higher expression of who we are. And so the garden experience is played out, right? The betrayal is played out in the garden, and the sacred wound occurs, and Judas betrays Jesus with a kiss, and who hasn't been there before? Come on, you all know it. We all have those stories. You remember that guy? Yeah, we all do. And a scuffle breaks out, right? When Judas comes and he brings the soldiers with him and he betrays Jesus with a kiss. And of course, the disciples rush to his aid, and there is a scuffle that breaks out, and one of the soldiers gets his ear cut off. Wow. It was right in Luke 22:51. Jesus touched the ear of him who was wounded and healed it. And now I'm thinking Jesus is saying to himself, what the hell have I been doing for the last 3 years? Didn't I teach you guys anything? You know, why is violence your first reaction? He had a 3-year ministry of teaching love and forgiveness, love and forgiveness, love and forgiveness. And the first thing one of his disciples does is cuts the ear off the guy who was coming to arrest Jesus. So there was a little reaction to the idea of you went to the sword first. Wow. Okay. Gee, what have I been doing for the last 3 years? This calls us to grow. It calls us to know a higher truth. So what was Jesus calling us to do? But to know a greater truth about the soldiers, about Jesus, about even the people in our lives who are the betrayers. To praise them and raise them. That's what we're being called to do. Breathe, breathe. It sounds like nobody's breathing anymore. That's what we're being called to do. That's what Spirit within us is being called to do, to know the truth for our enemies. Because what happens is we heal those relationships. We heal those relationships then. Our first and our most maybe compelling thought is to go to the sword. And we have to lay it down, and we have to go to the higher truth. We have to praise and raise, even if we feel that we were betrayed, even if we feel we were done wrong, even if just like if we are the betrayers, how many times have we betrayed someone else? How many times have we betrayed ourselves by not knowing the truth for us? How many times have we betrayed ourselves by selling ourselves short, by thinking of ourselves as simply the human and not the divine? We're betraying ourselves. We're betraying our own highest nature. So we look at those moments in our lives, those moments of betrayal, whether we were the betrayer or the betrayed, as opportunities for growth. I know that sounds horrible. What is it? They used to call it the OW in growth, the OW. You know, when we grow as a result of the betrayal, when we transform as a result of the betrayal, and then, you know, given the amount of time and distance, we can look back on those times and say, what? Oh my God, I would have never gotten here if it were not for that. Right? How many times does that moment of betrayal or that event of betrayal cause us to die to the old and to be reborn in something different and something higher and a grander idea of what our life could ever be? And we can look back at those moments and say, wow, if it weren't for that, I wouldn't be here. So then you can bless even those moments of betrayal. If it were not for that, I wouldn't have learned this. So the sacred wound grows us. It grows us. And there are plenty of other ways to grow. I am convinced that we don't really need that kind of betrayal and sacred wound. But we learn a lot that way. And so we need to bless it anyway. If we let it, the betrayal, the sacred wound, raises us up to a higher level of being. It brings us to that point of transformation where we die to the old and we are reborn. So that sacred wound kills off a part of us that is old, outdated, outgrown, and which no longer serves us. And sometimes we wouldn't change voluntarily. We got to get pushed into it. Sometimes Spirit knows what is best for us, even if it hurts. And we get pushed into it. This is the 2x4 experience, the cosmic 2x4. I know. Anyway, it forces us to change. It comes from outside, but it forces us to let go of something that no longer serves us, even if it feels like it was thrust upon us and it wasn't our choice. It really is that transformation that Spirit is calling for us to walk through. So then what? So then we have crucifixion, right? And I love the idea. I love the symbolism behind the cross because, it wasn't a cross. I think in the Greek, they use the word stavros in the Greek Bible, which really means stake in the ground. It's kind of a pole. The cross was a symbolic, the cross was a symbol of this spirit crashing through the physical world. You have this vertical representing spirit, and you have the horizontal representing the physical world, or the manifest world, and you have spirit that is penetrating into the physical world. And that's really that idea of wholeness within the tension of duality, because we are both and. We are spiritual and we are physical. And the cross is such a great representation of that. The cross precedes Jesus by another thing about thousands of years. And sometimes it was a cross of equal proportions, but it still represented the same thing. Spirit making itself known in form, in manifestation. Sometimes the 4 points represented, northeast, south, and west, the direction. Sometimes the quadrants in between were earth, air, fire, and water. It has a huge, long history that predates Christianity. And it's, again, about the wholeness within the tension of duality, which is what we are and what we feel. Can you feel that sometimes, that tension of duality being both and? We are spiritual beings housed in a body, and sometimes that is a little tense. But what the cross does, it reminds us that Spirit will have its way with us. Spirit will crash through the physical world. It will crash through into our experience of life and force us to transform. So we die to the old. And then what happens? We enter the tomb. The women in the Gospels saw angels as they approached the tomb where Jesus was laid to rest. And those angels were tomb watchers. And I love that idea. I love the symbolism around that. It's a great symbol for us. We should all have tomb watchers in our lives. I think we need tomb watchers every now and then. They are the highest aspect of ourselves. I think of our licensed practitioners, our tomb watchers in our lives. They hold the highest and best for us. They know the truth of us, and they sit in vigil, and they sit in practicing the presence for us and about us, even when we forget. They represent our own inner divinity. There's a beautiful painting by Ted DeGrazia. He did paintings of all the stations of the cross, but he did one in particular called Tomb Watchers. I think we have it. Is it up there? Am I in the way? It's a beautiful painting, and there are the angels that are surrounding Jesus' body, and they're holding the truth for him. We know the truth for someone even in their darkest moment. It's about surrounding someone with love and light regardless of conditions, knowing the truth for them. Don't we do that? Isn't that what we do as best friends, right? I know one of the things that they say is, as a best friend, you sing the song of that person's soul to them when they have temporarily forgotten the words. That's what best friends do. And I think for me, that's what the tomb watchers are about. They are these angelic figures that are the highest nature in ourselves. And we watch over ourselves and we watch over others. We are a tomb watcher for someone else in life. Your best friend or a family member or something. We keep vigil perhaps in our prayer practice for the pain of the world and for the people of the world. We are tomb watchers for the transformation of the earth. It's just such a lovely idea that we have someone that is always holding the high watch for us. So Easter is about that. It is about holding the truth regardless of the situation. There he is in the tomb and dead for all intent and purposes, and yet we know the truth. We know the truth. As tomb watchers, we sit and we hold the best while this transformation process is occurring. And these faithful companions who were there knew the truth. They knew the truth. So Easter is about that hope. It is about that willingness. It is about sitting among the dead, waiting for the transformation experience to occur, because resurrection happens. Resurrection happens. How many times have you been resurrected in life? How many times have you died to some old behavior or old idea of yourself and been reborn into a new life? It occurs. Resurrection happens. Rebirth occurs. Ernest Holmes said this. He said, "To practice the presence of God is to awaken within us the Christ consciousness. Christ is God in the soul of the human. The resurrection is the death of the belief that we are separated from God. For death is to the illusion alone and not to the reality." So each time we have these experiences, we die to the old, we die to what we've outgrown, and we are born anew into a higher idea of who we are. And that's what Jesus' ministry was about. When the traditional Christian churches meet and they think and they talk of resurrection, they talk about the resuscitation of dead tissue. They talk about the reanimation of a dead being restored to life rather than awakening the living. And that's what Jesus' ministry was about. It wasn't about reanimating dead tissue. It was about awakening the living. Us. It's a call for us to awaken to a greater truth. It is a call to those of us who are living to awaken to a better and a greater truth of who we are. The poet Wendell Berry coined the phrase, practicing resurrection. I love that. Practice resurrection. And I think that we could make that a daily spiritual practice. Each morning when we wake up, we can practice resurrection. We can be born anew each and every morning. I think it's great. It's an active, it's a dynamic phrase. Practice resurrection. Practice dying to the old, outdated ways. Practice dying to the old false beliefs that we've had. Questioning, do I really believe that? Does that thought serve me now? If not, what do I want to replace it with? What do I want to replace it with? And we die to an old thought. We die to an old relationship. We die to an old way of relating to life. And we engage and we embrace life at a higher level. There's no pain in change. Breathe. There's no pain in change. There is only pain in our resistance to it. So embracing it, was it one of our practitioners, I remember for years ago, she used to say, I change happens in my life, but nothing ever left without claw marks in it. We need to get beyond that and really embrace the change. Practice resurrection. Get comfortable with that change. Get comfortable dying to the old and the outdated and the outmoded. And how do we do that, By holding no grudges against anybody for anything. By praising and raising everyone worldwide, people you know, people you don't know. Forgiving and seeing everyone as love. Everyone. Ernest Holmes said that was the number one thing for this practice of ours. He said, well, the first thing you need to do is love everybody. If you haven't started doing that, do so immediately. I love it. Praise and raise everyone, even the betrayers in our lives. They taught us well. They taught us well. We transformed. We died to some false belief about ourselves. And we arose a greater idea of our life. We became that closer to what Spirit thinks of us as. Ernest Holmes said this. He said, "We are not going to attain immortality. We are that now. We are that now. Our contention is not that dead men live again, but that living men never die. We are already that. It is about living from that." And so that's what the Easter story is telling us. To become new, better, improved people. Human 2.0. To get that upgrade. To get that upgrade, to live the greater life that Spirit has in mind for us. Spiritual mastery is not accomplished by expressing the desire or by uttering affirmations or merely wishing that it is so. We don't get there by praying for 5 minutes a day and then going about the rest of our day mired in the muck and the condition of life at the level of the effect. We reach spiritual mastery by participating in our own process of transformation, our own resurrection, our own dying and rebirthing. That's how we reach spiritual mastery. This requires not only commitment, but also the follow-through, the practice, and not mistaking the ritual for the reality. Make sure that we're having that experience of the divine and we're not just going through the motions and we're not just lighting the candles and bowing to the east or praying on our knees, but we're actually having that experience of the divine. And then make time for spiritual community like this. Make time to be together with like-minded people that will support us. Spend time with your favorite tomb watchers. They will uplift you. They will hold you in the light even when you've temporarily forgotten it. Make everything we do a sacred act. And then we're praising and raising everything around us. When we see God wherever we look, we are praising and raising all of life. Pray all the time, every day. Praise and raise your life. Praise and raise someone else's. Praise and raise the life of the guy who just cut you off on the freeway. God love them. They teach us patience and forgiveness. Everyone. Who is outside of your circle of love? Bring them in. Make that circle bigger. Include them in. That's practicing resurrection. That's dying to an old belief about someone and allowing your heart to soften and yield and bring them in. That's practicing resurrection every day. When we're called by Spirit, answer. When we sit in meditation and we're finally called and we hear that still small voice, answer. Don't run away. Surrender. Give way, like the garden experience. Surrender to that greater call of what your life is. Surrender to that greater idea that Spirit has for your life. You are greater than this. You know, whatever it is, take the next step, whatever it is. Allow the dying of the old. Allow yourselves that moment to die to the old, to be in the tomb, to be dead, and to awaken to a new and grand and glorious idea of what our life is. Practice resurrection. Let go, forgive, become new in that moment. Become new in that moment. Ernest Holmes said this. He said, "This is the glorious concept which we may have this Easter season when we commemorate the fidelity of one man to his idea of life, which was so complete that he demonstrated to his followers the indestructible reality of his own soul. With this in mind, should we not attach a new meaning and a new significance, a new glory to the integrity of our own soul?" And for me, that's what the Easter story is about. It's about dying to the old. Each and every moment, we remember who we are. Thank you so much.